Different kind of actors. Joe Pesci plays the crazy mob guy. He's terrific, right? But there were
When a $22 million movie is made, you'd expect a guaranteed hit, but A Bronx Tale was anything but predictable. Behind the camera, chaos ruled. Broken buses, busted lights, even a director with a broken foot. The kid actor lost a tooth mid-scene, summer shots were filmed in freezing winter, and the lucky mom who landed a role wasn't auditioning. Oh, and that iconic line about wasted talent, it doesn't mean what you think. From real Bronx bad luck to fake Bronx streets, these stories will blow your mind. Let's uncover 20 unbelievable facts you never knew about A Bronx Tale. Number 20. The screenplay was inspired by Chazz Palminteri's experience as a bouncer.
Sonny in The Bronx Tale. And the reason I say that is because there's a dignity to the role.
Long before Chazz Palminteri became a well-known screenwriter, he was just another broke actor in Los Angeles trying to survive. He went for auditions that got him nowhere, and to make matters worse, the bills kept piling up. So he decided to work as a nightclub bouncer just to make ends meet until his dreams came true. One night, while he was doing his job, a short, older man with thick glasses demanded to be let in. He wasn't on the list, so Palminteri told him no. The man didn't take it well, so he warned him, saying, "You'll be fired in 15 minutes." The older man stormed off after the warning. As the man said, Chazz was out of his job by the end of the hour. It wasn't until later that he learned the man he turned away was Swifty Lazar, one of Hollywood's most powerful talent agents. And he had just shut down the one job Palminteri had left. Fired and humiliated, Chazz went home to his tiny apartment. With barely $200 in his account, he opened the fridge to grab a drink and saw something that stopped him cold. On the door was an old card his father had once given him. It read, "The saddest thing in life is wasted talent." He stared at those words for a long time and something shifted. Palminteri later said, "That night I decided if nobody were going to give me a great part, I'd write one myself." He sat down that very night and began what became A Bronx Tale. But he didn't make anything up. It was a real-life story from childhood. He had witnessed the shooting by himself outside his home when he was 9 years old. It was a memory sharpened into a story. He turned it into a one-man show where he played every character himself. Soon producers came, but they all wanted the rights instead of him. They wanted to buy the script and cast someone else in the lead. They said, "We'll give you $250,000, but you'll not star in it." And Chazz replied, "No, Sonny, no show." He turned down every offer. But one night, Robert De Niro came to see the play. He came backstage afterward and said, "This is the best one-man show I've ever seen. You write the screenplay, you play Sonny. I'll play your father, and I'll direct it." That moment was the turning point. He joined forces with Robert De Niro, and A Bronx Tale came to life. From a lost job to a standing ovation, from rejection to Robert De Niro, Palminteri had written his way into the part he was born to play. And it all started because he refused to let the wrong man into a club. Number 19. A Bronx Tale was Robert De Niro's directorial debut.
All right, one of my favorite movies of all time. I've reviewed it in the past, Bronx Tale.
Most people know Robert De Niro as one of the greatest actors of all time, but many don't realize that A Bronx Tale marked his first time behind the camera as a director. After decades of acting, De Niro chose this personal, small-scale story as his directorial debut. De Niro had a long history with mob films, having starred in several gangster classics but never directed anyone. When he first saw Chazz Palminteri's one-man show, he was so impressed by the raw honesty and emotional weight of the story that he knew it was the right project to begin directing with. Directing a movie for the first time is no easy feat, especially a story so layered with nuanced characters and a complex neighborhood dynamic. Interestingly, De Niro also stepped in front of the camera to play Lorenzo, the hard-working bus driver and protective father. Balancing acting and directing simultaneously can be incredibly challenging, especially for a first-time director. But De Niro managed it, ensuring the film maintained its emotional core. The success of A Bronx Tale showed that sometimes the best way to begin directing is to start with a story that truly moves you. Number 18. Robert De Niro turned to Martin Scorsese for directing tips. When Robert De Niro decided to direct A Bronx Tale, he knew he was entering new territory. So De Niro did what any new director might do. He reached out to a trusted friend and mentor, Martin Scorsese. Scorsese, already a legendary filmmaker known for his intense, authentic portrayals of New York and Italian-American life, was a natural choice for advice. The two had collaborated on numerous iconic films like Taxi Driver and Raging Bull, so De Niro knew he could count on Scorsese's guidance. According to interviews, De Niro sought Scorsese's counsel on everything from blocking scenes and camera movement to managing the pressures of a tight shooting schedule. In one candid moment, De Niro said, "Martin was incredibly generous with his time. He reminded me that directing is about telling a story, nothing more complicated than that, but it's also about patience and listening." Scorsese, in turn, expressed pride in De Niro's directorial debut, calling it a heartfelt and personal film. He praised how De Niro captured the essence of the Bronx world. This behind-the-scenes mentorship helped De Niro avoid some common first-time directing pitfalls. The result? De Niro's debut is still celebrated today as a stylish, emotionally rich film. It was a rare success for an actor stepping into directing for the first time, all thanks to the wisdom of Martin Scorsese. Number 17. Robert De Niro struggled to get a bus driver's license. When Robert De Niro signed on to direct and star in A Bronx Tale, no one expected the production to hit unexpected roadblocks before the cameras started rolling. In August 1992, the schedule came to an abrupt halt. This unexpected interruption is not because of weather or budget issues, but because De Niro had broken his foot. This was a frustrating setback for a director and actor known for his intense dedication. In addition to directing the movie, De Niro played Lorenzo, the bus driver and loving father who tries to keep his son away from the dangerous streets of the Bronx. To fully embody the role, De Niro insisted on getting a driver's license to operate the bus scenes, but this turned out to be a surprisingly complicated hurdle. Obtaining a commercial driver's license was more challenging than expected. From written exams to driving tests, driving a big city bus isn't easy, especially if you've never done it before. This slowed filming even further, stressing a production juggling many moving parts. By the time filming finally began, everyone was ready to push through, and De Niro's hands-on approach paid off on screen. The bus driving scenes feel genuine because he wasn't faking it. Number 16. Weather forced the crew to rewrite the calendar of the Bronx. Because of the delays caused by Robert De Niro's broken foot and his quest to get a bus driver's license, the filming of A Bronx Tale stretched longer than planned and dragged into less cooperative weather. The story is set in the Bronx's warm, sun-soaked summers, but the production unexpectedly battled autumn chills and the early signs of winter. These seasons don't match the bright, lively neighborhood vibe the film needed. This meant the crew had to scramble to keep the illusion of summer alive on screen. Outdoor scenes that were supposed to look warm and bustling suddenly risked looking cold. To fix this, the production team made several clever adjustments. They rescheduled certain scenes to catch the rare warm days, modified exterior shots to avoid showing frost or brown leaves, and even altered some camera angles to hide the signs of the changing season. De Niro, Palminteri, and the entire crew had to be flexible and patient through these weather challenges. For a film that deeply depended on the feel of the neighborhood, these seasonal shifts were a tricky obstacle. Yet, thanks to the team's creativity and resilience, the final product looks like it was shot on one endless summer day in the Bronx. This behind-the-scenes detail shows how even the slightest production hiccup can ripple through a film's making in surprising ways. Number 15. The child actor lost a tooth mid-production. Another small but tricky challenge while filming A Bronx Tale was when Francis Capra, who played Calogero, lost one of his baby teeth right in the middle of shooting. For a movie so grounded in realism and continuity, even something as simple as a missing tooth could cause significant headaches for the filmmakers. Since Capra's character is a young boy navigating the streets of the Bronx, the filmmakers had to decide how to handle this sudden change. The crew got creative. For scenes filmed before the tooth fell out, they made sure the shots focused more on Capra's face or used angles that didn't highlight his mouth. They carefully adjusted the lighting for the new scenes shot after losing the tooth to minimize attention on the gap. This is one of those tiny production quirks that remind us how unpredictable working with child actors can be, especially in a story that requires so much emotional depth and authenticity. This little dental drama proved that even the most minor details matter when crafting a believable world on screen. Number 14. Authentic period buses kept breaking down and causing chaos on set. One of the biggest challenges the A Bronx Tale crew faced was getting the buses just right. Since the film is set in the 1960s Bronx, real vintage buses from the era must be used. But hunting down those classic buses was only the beginning of their problems. When the old buses finally arrived on set, it quickly became clear that most were faulty. Some wouldn't start, others had engine troubles or stubborn brakes. The mechanical quirks and frequent breakdowns threw the tight filming schedule into chaos. Scenes involving the buses, especially those with Robert De Niro as the bus driver, had to be postponed or adjusted to accommodate unexpected repairs. The production team struggled to keep the buses running, calling in mechanics familiar with vintage vehicles and working long hours to patch things up. Despite all that effort, the buses sometimes refused to cooperate, creating frustrating delays. There were moments when the crew had to improvise, shooting around the bus scenes or rewriting shots to minimize the bus's presence while repairs were underway. Robert De Niro, known for his patience, stayed calm through these headaches, knowing how vital the buses were to the film's look and feel. Ultimately, the determination to use authentic buses paid off, lending the film a tangible sense of time and place that studio-made replicas could never have matched. Number 13. Almost none of A Bronx Tale was shot in the Bronx. Despite being a film so deeply rooted in the culture and streets of the Bronx, A Bronx Tale was barely filmed at all. In fact, except for one brief scene shot on City Island, nearly every part of the Bronx was captured in other parts of New York City, including Queens and Brooklyn. But why? The reason was primarily due to logistics. By the early 1990s, the real Bronx had changed dramatically from the tight-knit, working-class neighborhood Chazz Palminteri grew up in during the 1960s. Many of the buildings had been renovated, torn down, or replaced. The streets no longer looked like the world the film needed to recreate. So, instead of the Bronx, the crew found other corners of New York that still looked untouched by time. Much of the movie was filmed in Astoria, Queens, where the streets still had that older, worn-in texture. Parts of Brooklyn were also used, dressed, and detailed to pass as Belmont Avenue in the Bronx. Production designers brought vintage cars, old signage, and carefully styled extras to sell the illusion. Even the famous Chez Bippy bar, a centerpiece of the neighborhood scenes, was built from scratch in a different borough, then aged and dressed to feel like it had been there for decades. City Island is the only part of the Bronx that made it into the film as itself. So while native Bronx residents might be able to spot the difference, most viewers never noticed they weren't walking the real streets of the borough. Number 12. A Bronx Tale was painstakingly restored in 4K for its 30th anniversary. 30 years after A Bronx Tale first hit theaters, the film underwent a dramatic transformation. The original camera negatives were pulled from storage and scanned in 4K resolution to celebrate the film's 30th anniversary in 2023. This was more than just any touch-up job. It was a complete resurrection of a classic. Here's the best part. It came with the watchful eyes of Robert De Niro himself. The restoration was handled by Goldcrest Post, a highly respected post-production facility in New York, known for restoring some of the most beloved films in cinema history. The team started by locating the best surviving elements of the original negatives, which, after 3 decades, had naturally aged and required careful handling. These reels were scanned frame by frame at high resolution, revealing incredible detail that had never been visible before. De Niro, who oversaw the color grading, ensured that the film's emotional tone and visual language remained intact. The 4K version premiered at anniversary screenings and received praise from fans who were amazed at how rich and cinematic it looked. Number 11. Calagero's greasy hands magically clean themselves. Even in a film as carefully crafted as A Bronx Tale, occasional continuity errors sneak past the sharpest editors. One of those errors happened when young Calogero was working on his bike outside. He gets his hands dirty, fingers smudged with black chain oil. But then, moments later, when he has his first real encounter with Sonny, the local mob boss, those filthy hands suddenly become spotless. This is the kind of goof most people don't catch on their first viewing, especially when the scene is tense. The young boy was face to face with the man who had just shot someone in broad daylight, so it is normal for most viewers to focus more on their interaction, not on whether the kid washed his hands off screen. Interestingly, this goof has become something of a beloved blooper among fans. It reminds us that filmmaking is still imperfect, even with a powerhouse like De Niro directing and a profoundly personal script from Chazz Palminteri. Number 10. A Bronx Tale cost $22 million and production kept stopping for holidays, injuries, and setbacks. Though A Bronx Tale may feel like a small film, it carried a surprisingly weighty price tag of around $22 million. In the early 90s, it was a serious investment. Part of what made the budget so big wasn't extravagance or the need for authenticity. The string of production breaks and delays made the filming more unpredictable than anyone expected. The project had already hit a roadblock early when Robert De Niro broke his foot before principal photography began. That delay pushed the schedule forward, dragging filming into colder months. But as shooting progressed, the crew hit another unavoidable pause: the Christmas celebration of 1992. The team took a break for the holidays just as they were juggling complicated logistics between shooting exteriors and interiors. Because of the filming breaks and the seasonal challenges, many indoor sequences had to be tackled separately, stretching the schedule longer than initially planned. Each break in production meant added costs. What should have been a modestly budgeted film turned into a multi-million-dollar undertaking that stretched across seasons. Number 9. Actors had to keep up their Bronx accents. In A Bronx Tale, the Bronx exists not only in the buildings but also in how people talk. Every slang, vowel, and rhythm is part of what makes the film feel so authentic. But maintaining that realistic working-class Italian-American Bronx accent over long takes was no easy feat, especially for a cast that included performers from different backgrounds. That's why, behind the scenes, dialect became important, especially for Robert De Niro and Chazz Palminteri. Both men grew up in New York and knew the regional sound like the back of their hands. According to cast members and crew recollections, De Niro and Palminteri were constantly tuned in to the delivery of lines. In interviews, Palminteri has said that authenticity was non-negotiable. He once described the Bronx dialect as fast, tough, and musical, but not cartoonish. That distinction mattered, so they'd stop and recalibrate when an actor's voice started drifting. Young Francis Capra, who played the 9-year-old version of Calogero, was coached to make sure his accent stayed believable without feeling forced. The dialect came naturally for De Niro, who played Lorenzo, the blue-collar father. But as a director, he listened to everyone else's lines like a hawk. He'd pull the actor aside and offer a correction if a delivery felt off, even slightly. One crew member said he was low-key about it, but he noticed everything. Although there may not be extensive documentation of these corrections in official production notes, you can hear them in the performances. The dialogue has a lived-in quality, resulting from relentless attention to detail from two Bronx-born storytellers who refuse to let their neighborhood's voice get lost in translation. Number 8. Every street scene was choreographed. While A Bronx Tale feels like it effortlessly captures what it should, the truth is that the most casual scenes were actually the hardest to shoot. One simple scene where young Calogero comes out of his apartment, crosses the street, and meets Sonny took hours of setup and multiple takes. Although it feels spontaneous, behind the scenes details revealed that it was a dance. The production team, including De Niro, focused on this street choreography throughout filming. They didn't want the environment to feel staged, but they couldn't let it unravel into chaos. One assistant director reportedly had to consistently remind extras, "You were leaning against the hydrant," or "You walked behind the stroller, not in front." They did their best to preserve the natural rhythm of the scene. Because of minor continuity errors, crowd scenes like those at the churchyard or the stoop gatherings often required several takes. In more than one instance, background extras unknowingly drifted from their marks, or props were adjusted slightly between shots, causing breaks in continuity. Chazz Palminteri once described the production's street energy as controlled chaos, saying, "It had to feel like you were walking into real life, but every inch of it had to be crafted." Ultimately, it's one of the reasons A Bronx Tale feels so alive. Number 7. Calogero and Jane's interracial romance almost got cut.
Want to go to fights with me tomorrow night?
One of the most potent elements in A Bronx Tale is the romance between teenage Calogero and Jane, a black girl from his school. It's tender but complicated. Many don't know that this storyline was almost cut entirely from the film. In the early stages of development, some producers worried that the interracial romance might distract from the core narrative, which is the father-son relationship between Calogero and Lorenzo, and the looming influence of Sonny and the mob. They questioned whether the romantic thread was necessary or whether it would dilute the movie's central themes, but Robert De Niro wasn't having it. According to interviews and production notes, De Niro strongly believed that the relationship between Calogero and Jane was essential to the story as a symbol of the deeper conflicts in the Bronx during that era. Calogero falling for Jane was part of his awakening. De Niro once said, "The love story is important because it shows what Calogero is willing to challenge. He goes against his friends, his neighborhood's prejudice. It's about growth." That's the heart of the film, too. Chazz Palminteri, who wrote the original play, also included Jane's character. He based the story on his own life, and while the romance wasn't autobiographical, it was grounded in the real tensions he saw growing up. Jane's presence brings to the surface the racism in Calogero's circle, particularly when his so-called friends jump her brother, forcing him to reckon with who he really wants to be. Actress Taral Hicks, who played Jane in her breakout role, later said she felt the love story gave the film a different kind of power, and that it resonated deeply with audiences, especially those who saw themselves in the struggle to love across boundaries. Number 6. Catherine Narducci brought her son to audition and landed the role of Calogero's mom herself. When she walked into the audition room for A Bronx Tale, Catherine Narducci had no intention of becoming part of the cast. In fact, she wasn't even there for herself. She was there to support her young son, who was auditioning for the role of young Calogero. Like many New York moms, she hoped her kid might catch a lucky break. But by the end of the day, it was her name the casting directors were circling. According to the story, someone behind the casting table noticed Narducci's presence and strong Bronx look and mannerisms during the audition process. Her accent was real, and she had that unmistakable neighborhood charm. She fit the part of Rosina, Calogero's mother, almost too perfectly. One of the casting team reportedly turned to her and said, "You should read too." And she did. With no formal acting training at the time, Narducci auditioned for the role of Rosina. She landed it not because of connections or experience, but because she was the character. She'd lived that life. She was from East Harlem, raised in a tight Italian-American household, and her performance came straight from memory. In later interviews, Narducci recalled the surreal moment. "I just came to bring my son, and the next thing I know, I'm reading with De Niro." Impressed by her natural presence and grounded performance, Robert De Niro cast her in the pivotal role. It was her film debut, and it kickstarted a successful acting career. Ironically, her son didn't get the role of Calogero, but his audition turned into one of the most unexpected stage mom makes it big moments in Hollywood casting lore. What started as a simple ride to an audition turned into a life-changing moment. Number 5. The real Eddie Mush brought his bad luck to set. If you've seen A Bronx Tale, you probably remember Eddie Mush, the perpetually unlucky gambler whose presence is enough to jinx a winning bet. In the movie, he's the guy everyone wants to avoid at the racetrack because his bad luck is so legendary. But what makes it even more surreal is that an actor didn't play Eddie Mush. He played the real Eddie Mush. Yes, Chazz Palminteri brought the man who inspired the character into the film to play himself. Mush, whose real name is Eddie Montanaro, was a longtime friend of Palminteri's from the neighborhood, and when it came time to cast the role, he was the perfect choice. Palminteri once said in an interview, "Nobody could play Mush like Mush, it had to be him." But something happened on set that is more than just a coincidence. It rained heavily on the first day Eddie Mush showed up on set to shoot his scenes. The crew, many of whom already know of the legend's bad luck, couldn't help but laugh at the timing. People joked that the curse was real, that Mush had brought the storm with him. It was all good fun, but the eerie alignment with his on-screen persona added a layer of Bronx folklore to the shoot. Chazz Palminteri said it best. Some people thought casting the real Mush was risky, but I knew it would work. That guy's face, his timing, his voice, he didn't have to act. He just had to be. Number 4. Some Bronx details in the film are out of time. Though A Bronx Tale feels like a loving time capsule of the Bronx in the 1960s, not every detail on screen is perfectly accurate to the era or location. If you look closely, you'll spot a few things that don't quite fit the period, like street signs, certain cars, and even some traffic lights that didn't exist in the Bronx then. This kind of historical looseness is more common than you might think in period films, but it's a fun quirk given how much the movie prides itself on authenticity. The Bronx has changed a lot since the 60s, and finding streets that still look untouched is a challenge. The production crew chose to film many Bronx scenes in Queens and Brooklyn, which sometimes meant using streets close enough but not exact matches to the Bronx of the era. Cars are an obvious giveaway. Some models that appear on the roads were released a bit later than the film's setting, or were more common outside the Bronx. Traffic lights also posed a subtle problem. In a few scenes, the style and placement of traffic signals don't align with what was used in the Bronx in the early 1960s. Despite these small slips, the production team focused heavily on getting the big picture right, the feel of the neighborhood, the characters, the dialect, and the emotional core. In an interview, set decorator Patricia Sui reflected on the challenge. "We tried hard to source period-appropriate cars, signs, and props, but when you're shooting in a living, breathing city, some things just can't be changed. You do your best, and trust the story to carry the rest." This makes it more glaring that filmmaking is always a mix of fact and fiction. And sometimes a misplaced street sign or a slightly off car is the price you pay for capturing the bigger truth of a story. Number 3. The movie's most famous line isn't about talent at all.
Remember, the saddest thing in life is wasted talent. You could have all the talent in the world, but if you don't do the right...
One of the most memorable lines in A Bronx Tale is, "There's nothing worse in life than wasted talent." This sounds simple, but it's actually pretty deep. It's repeated several times throughout the film, almost like a mantra. But if you pay attention, the movie never really shows Calogero or anyone else with some flashy or exceptional talent being wasted. Instead, the line points to the choices that shape a person's life. This line originally comes from Chazz Palminteri's play, delivered by Sonny, the local mob boss. It sounds like classic advice, the kind you'd expect from a motivational coach. But Sonny's meaning is moral and personal potential, whether someone lives up to who they could be. Interestingly, many viewers and critics have pointed out this line as a key to understanding the film's message. It's less about literal talent and more about potential wasted through poor decisions, fear, or giving in to negative influences. Palminteri has emphasized this more profound meaning in interviews. It's not about being the best at something. It's about not throwing away what's inside you, your character, your future, your chance to be better. That's why the line resonates so much. It sticks with you because it captures a universal truth about human potential. Number 2, a real ex-mobster called out a key scene as totally unrealistic.
My father, who was a bus driver, he was in the movie too, but we had to cut him out.
One of the most tense moments in A Bronx Tale is the police lineup scene where Lorenzo, Calogero's father, forces his son to identify a killer. It's a pivotal moment showing Lorenzo's strict principles and the harsh realities of their world. But despite its dramatic power, this scene caught the attention of Michael Franzese. He is a former caporegime of the Colombo crime family and one of the most famous mobsters to turn away from. He publicly criticized the scene as unrealistic under actual mob norms. According to him, forcing a kid to identify a killer in a police lineup publicly would be unheard of in organized crime circles. In real life, such exposure would put the family and the boy at serious risk. Chazz Palminteri, the writer and star of the film, has been open about this. In interviews, he admitted, "We took some liberties. The scene was meant to highlight the moral conflict between Lorenzo's values and the violent world around them. It's symbolic, not literal." Robert De Niro, who directed the film, also supported this choice. It wasn't about accuracy, but about emotional truth. For fans curious about the real mob world, Franzese's critique is a reminder that Hollywood often bends facts for storytelling. Number 1. Palminteri insisted the film honor his father's working-class life. Chazz Palminteri's connection to A Bronx Tale is not just about writing a story about the neighborhood or the mob, but also about paying tribute to his upbringing, especially to his father's hard work and values. Palminteri was adamant that the character of Lorenzo, Calogero's father, be portrayed as a working-class hero, an honest man who drives a bus and teaches his son the importance of integrity and respect. This insistence came from Palminteri's desire to balance the film's focus. Lorenzo wasn't just a background dad, he was the story's moral compass, inspired by Palminteri's father, who worked as a bus driver and embodied old-school values. In interviews, Palminteri has shared, "My father was a hard-working man who didn't have much but gave everything for his family. I wanted that reflected honestly on screen because that's the foundation of who I am." Robert De Niro, who portrayed Lorenzo, took this to heart. He spent time with Palminteri's family and immersed himself in the life of a working-class father, studying the small, quiet moments that define such men. The film's depiction of Lorenzo driving the bus, coming home tired but proud, and teaching Calogero lessons about respect and hard work was all carefully crafted to honor that real-life inspiration. In the end, Lorenzo's character isn't just a part of the story, he's the soul of it. Which of these weird facts is the most striking for you? Let us know in the comments section, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Hit the like button and watch other videos on this channel before you leave.